Okay. Please give a warm welcome to Barbara Zimmermann. She is a professor at the Inland University of Norway, Inland Norway University of Applied Sciences, and she research mooses and large carnivores. And I just give you the word, and please introduce yourself and start your very interesting presentation.
Thank you, Sophia. I will just share my screen first. A little moment. Oh, I cannot share my screen. It seems like it's disabled participant screen sharing. So, Sophia, I think you would have.
Okay. You can try again.
Yes.
Okay.
Now it seems to work. Yeah, now you can see my screen. Thank you so much. Yes, thank you for inviting me to give a talk at your seminar. My name is Barbara Zimmermann, and I work, as Sophia said, at Inland Norway University of Applied Sciences, where Sophia actually spent quite some time for getting insight into other projects and other research. And it was nice to host her at our place, and she was contributing a lot also with her field work, and she was helping us with the Wolves Across Borders conference that we had in May. So I'm originally from Switzerland, but I've been living more than half of my life in Norway, and I have done my PhD here in Norway, and I'm working here now still, and I'm both teaching and I'm also doing quite some research. So the study what I'm going to present to you today is about our research on moose. I've just heard that you've had the first moose in Hungary, so then you can get a bit better prepared on what you can wait for. It's actually very interesting because moose is a species that is very well adapted to cold environments. Look at the moose here on the picture. It's a young moose. It's a 1-year-old moose, and it has very, very long legs. So, and why does it have so long legs? Because it's optimally adapted to a lot of snow. So it can walk through the forest and is not hindered by a half meter of snow, but then when it gets higher than 70 centimeters, then it's moose can get a bit more stuck, or they don't move that much anymore. But so they are really well adapted to snow and to cold environments. Also in our latitudes, the moose have like their optimal winter temperature at -10 degrees. And in the summer it's just above like 0, maybe +10 degrees. But so they're really well adapted to this cold environments and boreal forest. And so I think it's also really exciting now to see this expansion of the moose into their earlier habitats. So they definitely also can make it in temperate environments. And they have been in those places in Central and Western Europe before, in more temperate forests. So it seems like they are kind of adaptable. It's an adaptable species. So it will be interesting to learn more about the moose also in the southern regions. But for now, we keep to Scandinavia and to the boreal forest. As you see, there are many co-authors so I'm not alone on this. I have very good colleagues working together on moose, and they are both from my university, but also from the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences, from the Grimsö Research Station. Let me see, it doesn't work yet. Now it works, yeah. So the moose is a exposed to many risks. So the title was Moose Under Pressure. And what are the pressures on moose? Yeah, the first thing we think of is predation and hunt or harvest. That's kind of a direct mortality, and definitely is a kind of the main factor regulating the moose populations here in the boreal forest. But then we also have more indirect effects on moose. We have infrastructure development, for example, the building of roads. We have a huge network of forest roads in the boreal forest to exploit forest resources. And this network is expanded, and the roads are getting broader because they have to bring their big forestry machines into the area. Also, we see a lot of wind power development in Scandinavia, also in the forested areas, not only along the coast and on the mountains, but also in forests. And so this has also might have effects. We don't know yet, but it might also have effects on moose. For sure, forestry is a very important factor. I already talked about the forest roads, but actually forestry can also be positive because in the 1950s, we have started to use clear cutting as the main forest management, or as the main way how to extract resources out of the forest. And with those clear cuts, we get these hot spots of summer food because we get a lot of new fresh vegetation coming up, and raspberries and fireweed and like different perennial plants, but then also a lot of deciduous tree species that come up because suddenly there is a lot of light. And so for a while, for like maybe 10-12 years, these clear cuts kind of turn into very resource rich areas, and this was one of the main reasons why the moose population in the 1970s started to explode in Scandinavia. So we had an incredible increase in a number of moose. But the other reason also is that we had got better hands on the harvest. So we started to have a quota-based harvest system where different sex and age categories were targeted in a way so that we could kind of optimize the harvest. But yes, forestry important. It comes with a lot of food. But on the other side, it can also have negative effects through forest roads. And then we have the weather. The weather is affecting the food resources. In dry years, we will not have that much productivity, and moose actually can starve. One of our most important weather variables is the snow. So the snow here in Evenstad, where I work, now if I could, maybe I can show you on my camera, if you can see my camera, it's white and nice and snowy right here out there now. So the snow is, we have snow layer from like mid-November to end of April. So half of the year for a moose is kind of covered in white. And if the snow doesn't only cover kind of our trees and whatever, but it also covers the food of the moose. Moose don't anymore then have access to the field vegetation. So, and also snow can, if it's too much snow, if it's more than 70 centimeters, it will also hinder moose movement. It's a very important variable. But as I also said, dry summers can be detrimental for moose. If it's a coolish kind of rainy spring and summer, that is more positive for the moose because then the plant development is slower and more productive. Then we have a competition. There are other species in the forest that might eat the same things as the moose. I'm thinking a bit about the roe deer, red deer. Red deers are mostly grazers, but they can also, especially in the winter, they also like to browse on trees. And they also in the fall and in the spring, they eat a lot of heather in the forest, for example, bilberry plant. So there might be some overlap, dietary overlap, but we don't actually know too much about the competition between those species. Diseases is another pressure on moose. We have, for example, a new disease coming, or let's say it's more a parasite. I won't call it really a disease yet, but we have a parasite that you have a lot. I know you have a lot of them in Hungary. It's the deer fly, and that's a new element in our regions and also for the moose. But there are also other kind of diseases. We have now found some echinococcus, for example, in moose, and so hunters are a bit concerned about that. Diseases can be spread easily if moose gather close together, and that happens especially when there is supplementary feeding of moose. And why would there be supplementary feeding? Yeah, because there are several reasons why it is done in some areas of Scandinavia. Partly it's to keep the moose away from the roads. And here I don't mean the forest roads that I've been talking about, but I mean the big roads, because we have those collisions with moose. They can be detrimental, not only for the moose, but also for the car or the people involved. Other reasons for supplementary feeding is to keep them away from young forest stands, so they won't make too much damage to production trees, or just to increase the productivity in the moose population. So there are several reasons why it is done, but actually it has been in Norway now, it has been forbidden to do supplementary feeding because we have had a first outbreak of chronic wasting disease even though it was in reindeer, in wild reindeer. It is kind of, we don't really know yet if this disease or this prion disease can go over to moose. So that's why it has been stopped, but landowners can still apply for it, and they can get some exception from the law if they have some good reasons for that. So a lot of factors here, and many of those factors are actually driven by climate, like the weather, the forestry, infrastructure, when it comes to wind power development, for example, and so on. So the climate is kind of a main factor in the background that influences a lot of those factors that affect moose. So my talk today is, I will talk more about harvest and predation, and I will first tell you a bit about how many moose that die, and then where do they actually die, and how can they survive in these risky times. And then in the end, I will talk about upcoming research on climate change impacts. So the first question, how many moose die? So in Scandinavia, we have about 400,000 moose. And if I say Scandinavia, I mean Norway and Sweden. Finland is not a part of Scandinavia. Finland is a part of the Nordic countries that we also belong to. But so if we just look into Norway and Sweden isolated, like this peninsula here, it's about 400,000 moose. And the densities differ a lot. We have some areas with very low densities, especially those areas that, were in the winter when the moose migrate out of those snow-rich areas. And then they can have very, very low densities. But then again, they can gather and have kind of high densities in winter concentration areas. Annually, 1 out of 3 to 4 moose are shot every year. So 110,000 moose are harvested. And we have 260,000 hunters registered annually as moose hunters. So 260,000 hunters that buy a license. So you can see that it is a very important cultural event actually every fall. Moose harvest is kind of that's for many people it's more important than Christmas and Easter together. So it's an important time, and it is also kind of a strong cultural heritage in these two countries. And then we had the wolf that returned into this area. Wolves were extirpated in Scandinavia, but there were wolves surviving in Finland and adjacent areas in Russia. And so wolves immigrated into this area here and established a population. And now the population counts about 540 wolves with about 55 packs and 28 pairs, and most of them are on the Swedish side and a little bit on the Norwegian side here. You might maybe wonder why they are kind of concentrated down here and there is no wolves here. This is because here in this area we have the semi-domesticated reindeer. So we have this reindeer husbandry, which is a traditional Sami way to produce food in these very production poor areas. So, and both Norway and Sweden have decided that the wolves are unwanted in this area here. So there is no wolf establishment allowed. As soon as there is a pair that tries to settle, they are either shot or they are moved into this area here. Also, we don't have more wolves west of in the western part of Norway here. And this is because we have a lot of free-ranging sheep in the summer in these areas. And again, it is kind of a political decision to not have any wolves allowing to establish in this area. In the south here of Sweden, wolves are coming now more and more, and I guess in the next 2-3 years we will see an explosion of wolves in this area here. There will be a lot of wolves establishing. We have already now 3-4 packs in this area here down in the south, and there are more to come from this. So it just takes time for them to establish because there is a major motorway between Oslo and Stockholm that kind of stops some of the spreading of the wolves. But it will now, I think the process has started, so there will be more wolves in the south. We have started our project that is called Scandul, the Scandinavian Wolf Research Project, in 1998 with VHF coloring first, and then in 2001 we started to GPS color wolves. And so far we have colored more like 215 in different individuals, some of them for several years. So we have a lot of data on wolves. And actually the first coloring of wolves we have done, or like the GPS coloring was done to actually study the predation of wolves on moose, because that was kind of one of the main conflicts, or maybe let's say one of the first questions that were raised when wolves came back. It was like, what impact will these wolves have on the moose population? And so we started to do these predation studies, where we go into clusters of positions where like the wolves have spent several hours at the same place, and then we search those positions shortly after the wolf had been there, and then we try to see if we find rests or like of carcasses or that the wolves had been killing and eating on. And so far we have done 84 such studies in different seasons, And actually, Sophia was doing one of those studies in a summer study now this summer. And when we do that over a certain time, a certain amount of weeks, then we can actually calculate the kill rate from this. So in total, we have found 1,426 carcasses, and 80% of them were kind of killed by wolves, certainly or probably killed by wolves. So they don't do that much scavenging. They do a little bit, but they mostly kill their own prey in our areas. And so by calculating kill rates, we can kind of then we can extrapolate for an entire year. So then we know how many moose an entire wolf pack kills every year. The kill rate in itself is not actually that interesting. It just says something about how much wolves kill, but we for sure have to relate that to how many moose there are in the area. So if we find out that the wolves kill about 100 moose within a year, then it really matters if there are like 1,000 moose in that territory or only 200 moose in that territory. So we need to have also numbers on how many moose there are. And we do that with fecal pellet group counts. Here you see it was coming in the newspapers when we did one of those pellet counts, because the journalists think it's kind of funny that we go out and count all these moose piles in the forest. So we had that was kind of just a copy from a newspaper thing. So with these fecal pellet group counts, we can estimate the winter abundance of moose, because we know the defecation rate. So we know that moose poop about 14 times per day, and so we can kind of estimate winter abundance of moose. If we then add all the moose that have been killed by wolves from our predation studies, we know that, and we add the hunting statistics, so how many moose that have been killed during harvest, and also have numbers on how many that were traffic killed, then we can kind of calculate how many moose we have after calving. And this is our kind of, so this is the starting place in 1st of June. It's just when the calving has happened or is happening during end of May, beginning of June. So this way we can calculate or estimate the number of moose that were available for a wolf pack within the wolf territory after calving on the 1st of June. And then we would like to know how many or how large proportion of the moose that die of these moose that were available. And again, then to do that is kind of consists of the predation rate. So how large proportion that the wolves have taken, and how large proportion that was taken by hunters, and then other mortality. So we have done this calculation, and I here give you kind of the main results. What you can see here, this long line with names, very strange looking names. These are different wolf territories. And on the x-axis here, you see the percentage, and so this is always the mortality. So how large proportion of the moose that had died. Here for these orange bars are the wolf predation. So on average, 7.58% about of the moose that were in the territory by 1st of June died due to wolf predation. And you see there is quite some variation, and I will come back to that variation later. And then in some of the territories, we also have bears, brown bears, or in most of them actually, but in some we have a lot, and in others we have very few. And so the bear predation makes up about 2.3% on average. but you can see that in some areas the bear predation is even more important than the wolf predation. Bears, they kill newborn calves in the summer, just after calving, for about 3 to 5 weeks after calving. Bears really like to pick those newborn calves. And then we have harvest. Harvest makes up on average about 17%. So, and again, you can see there is some variation here, but it's about 17%. And then traffic and disease together, we have estimated on about 2.5%. We have very good number on traffic accidents, but we don't have good numbers on diseases. We have some numbers from GPS colored moose, so that's why we can kind of know how much it makes up about. So if we sum this all together, the annual mortality that happens is for moose is about 29%. So nearly 1 out of 3 moose die every year. Can you see that? And this number actually relates very well to what we know about the reproduction potential in moose. So moose, like the moose population, if it was not regulated, it would grow like with about 30% each year. So this 29% fits very well with the potential that the moose has to kind of, you know, reproduce, and with the recruitment of moose every year. So, but then as you can see here, there is quite some variation in wolf predation, and so we have tried to find out what explains this variation in wolf predation. And so we saw that one factor that might be important is moose density, but actually we don't find any relationship between moose density in the area and the predation rate. So moose density doesn't really seem to make a big difference. But we see a clear relationship with wolf territory size. So in wolf territories that are very big, we have very low predation rate on about 2%, 2.5%. But in small territories, predation rate can be very high. And why is that? Yeah, that is because in small wolf territories, there are not that many moose. So actually moose abundance is the most important factor. So if we combine moose density and wolf territory size, then we can get the moose abundance. So the number of moose, it doesn't say no moose within territory, but it says the number of moose within the territory. So the number of moose within the territory, if there are many, then we have kind of a very low predation rate. But if we have few moose, which is kind of a combination of small wolf territories and small moose densities, then we have a high predation rate. Right. We also tested some other relationships. We were, for example, interested to see if there was a kind of a relationship with wolf density or with the wolf pack size. So do big packs or like large packs, do they have a higher predation rate than small packs? But we don't actually see any relationship for wolf density and wolf pack size. So even small packs can kill as many moose as large packs. But when we look at the moose to wolf ratio, then we get a negative relationship here. But it's as you can see, there is kind of an outlier that is probably very influential for this relationship, so it's not very strong. So how many moose there are per wolf? That is a better description than just only the wolf density itself. Right. Harvest rate. We also saw there was some variation in harvest rate, and so we also wanted to test what explains this variation. And first we did the same as with the wolf. We wanted to see if it depends on the moose density, because you would expect that maybe in areas with high moose density, the harvest rate should be lower because they maybe don't manage to kill as many moose. But actually we didn't find any relationship at all. So it was not connected to moose density. And I think that has to do with the fact that actually the moose harvest is the strongest regulating factor of the moose population. So we use harvest as a management tool to decide if we should have more moose or less moose. And so we cannot directly relate it to moose density, but we could say it that way, that when there are a lot of moose, then maybe we would like to reduce the moose population. But that again depends on the area and depends on forest and how like what the goals are for forestry, for example. So there are other factors that are important. Also, we didn't actually find any relationship between wolf predation rate and harvest rate. We thought that maybe there should be a negative relationship. So if wolves take a lot of moose, then the harvest rate maybe should be lower. But actually, we cannot find any relationship there, and also not if we add the bear predation on top of it. So to summarize all of this, the annual mortality in moose was about 29% estimated, wolf predation rate about 8%. So you can see it makes up about 1/4 of the total mortality. Harvest rate is the double of the wolf predation rate, 17%. And it was not related to predation rate. And we have a report in Norwegian that describes all this, but we have just now submitted the manuscript for peer review, where we also are presenting these results. So I hope you will soon be able to read them in a scientific journal. The second question, where do moose die? So for this, I want to present you the work done by our PhD student that we had during the last years, Georgia Auxilio. Maybe some of you know her. She has been working a lot in our project that was called Grensevilt, Border Wildlife. And she has looked into this question, where do moose die? She worked in a study area of 2,700 square kilometers. It was a cross-bordering study area that included areas of both Norway and Sweden. Inside the area where we have wolves, and we had GPS-colored wolves in that area, 2 wolf territories, and we did those predation studies. And from those predation studies, she used machine learning to predict all kill sites during autumn and winter based on the movement pattern. And then, in addition, she called 106 hunting teams, all the hunting teams in that area, and asked them to give them the coordinates of where moose were shot. She did an excellent job, could convince all the hunters to actually tell where they did shoot the moose, and so she has got a map for over 2 years that shows all those places. And this is how the map looks like. So the blue circles are the wolf-killed moose based on the movement pattern and the predation studies that we've done. And the triangles are the hunter-killed moose that were reported by the hunters. And as we already can see, is that there is some difference between how the blue circles are distributed and how the triangles are distributed. Triangles are more or less all over the place, whereas the blue circles are a bit more concentrated in some areas. So what she did next, and she also looked into the temporal effect. So when is the risk highest to die in harvest? And that is for sure during the daytime, during the hunting season. But when it comes to wolf predation, that's mostly during nighttime. And then again, we did these fecal pellet counts to estimate the moose densities in the study area. And she also used a lot of environmental variables to describe the habitat. And so what she wanted to describe is what is the habitat that is kind of risky for moose. So she did this for wolves and hunters separately. So risk to be killed by wolves. During the hunting season, the risk was highest far from houses and in young forest stands. And you can see that on this map, like from blue to red, blue is low risk and red is very high risk. And then after the hunting season, the risk to be killed by wolves was highest close to roads, which maybe you think is a bit surprising. And I will explain you why later, but also in young forest stands. So why close to roads? This is because moose in the winter, they migrate from summer areas down to the valley. And here you can see one of these valleys here and one of the valleys here. They migrate down into those valleys because there is less snow and more food available. And so the wolves, they actually follow after the moose or use those areas. I mean, they don't really follow after, but they use those areas more down in the valley. And that's why the risk then also is higher to be killed by wolves in those areas. The risk to be shot is kind of, here you can see from the map already, from the colors, it's kind of more even distributed all over the landscape. So you don't have this dark red and dark blue, but it's more kind of, there is kind of a risk in this. Yeah, here you can see 1 to 2.4. So it's kind of, the risk is kind of more intermediate, but it's all over the place. And it's a higher risk in flat terrain at places where the moose density is high, close to roads, and also close to bogs, which also means it's kind of more open areas. And then the next question is, how can you survive in such a landscape of risk? So if you're a moose and you have to navigate in this landscape, and it even changes from between day and night. So, you know, this is more kind of what happens, how the risks look like during night, and this is more what it looks like during daytime, during the hunting season. So how would you navigate in this? So this is the next question, and how to survive. So we had 18 GPS colored moose in this study area. Actually, this here it says Auxilio et al. Manuscript, but it has just been accepted for publication. So it will be Auxilio et al. 2023 and will be published in Ecology and Evolution. So it will be out anytime now, maybe this week, maybe next week. You can read the manuscript there. So she looked into the habitat use of the moose in this landscape of risk. And again, so we have this gradient from low risk, blue, to high risk, red. And wait, sorry, that was wrong. Yeah, and so she looked at the moose selection for a given area. So would they like go for low risk areas or high risk areas? And for sure, we would expect something like this, that moose would select mostly low risk areas in those times when they are risky, and high risk areas would be avoided. So low selection for high risk areas. But it is not that easy. We have to take into account the time of day and also the reason to die. So, for example, we would predict that when it comes to the hunting season, they should select areas with low hunting risk, and they should avoid areas with high hunting risk during daytime. But during nighttime, they shouldn't really bother about it at all. And then after the hunting season, we would think that they don't really bother at all about hunting risk at all, because there are no hunters out there anymore, independent of day and night. When it comes to wolves, we would expect this negative relationship with moose selection only during nighttime, so avoiding areas of high wolf risk in the night. But during daytime, we wouldn't expect any difference between, risky places. And it doesn't really matter if it's during hunting season or after hunting season, we would kind of expect the same pattern. So what did Georgia find? Actually, she found, as we had predicted, more or less when it comes to hunting. So the moose were really avoiding those areas during daytime that had high hunting risk. So they are smart animals, but and in the nighttime they didn't really bother. And after the hunting season, they didn't bother during daytime, and they even used a bit more time in those areas that would have had high hunting risk during daytime, during hunting season. When it comes to wolves, there actually it was very surprising. It was exactly the opposite of what was expected. So moose were actually trying to select for areas with high wolf risk, independent of time of day and time and season. So that was really, really interesting. And so then the question is, what's going on here? So maybe you remember what was really the important factor that explained the landscape of risk when it comes to wolf. Young forest stands are really important. They have a high risk, and so probably for the moose it is kind of a trade-off. The moose has to decide between food and the risk of being taken by wolves. But because we have like maybe 1,000 moose within one wolf territory, the risk that it's just me as a moose that is going to be taken by wolf is kind of quite low. So then it's maybe worth actually to take the risk and rather fill up the belly with a lot of food. And with that also being more able to, for example, defend the calf or defend against a wolf attack. So there is probably this trade-off, and another explanation is also that moose maybe still is kind of naive to wolves. The naivety hypothesis is really interesting. We have been publishing several papers on that, where we kind of think that the moose still is not really doesn't really have the good anti-predator behavior that would be necessary to avoid wolf predation. And this can have several reasons, maybe because it has just it hasn't really evolved it yet, but it can also have a connection with the way how moose are hunted in Scandinavia. We use those hunting dogs. The moose hunting dogs that are kind of a little copy of a wolf. What they do is they are usually loose, and they try to find a moose, and when they find one, they start barking. And the moose should do what is best against the wolf attack. It usually stands its ground and tries to defend the calf. And so what then might happen is that actually those moose are more easily shot by the hunters. So there might actually have been a selection towards moose that do the wrong thing when it comes to wolves, and those are the moose that are running away. They are easy to be attacked by wolves, but they are harder to shoot for hunters. So my last chapter was about food, forestry, weather, and climate. These complex interactions of how climate affects moose in different indirect ways. For this, we have to maybe go back to 10,000 years and see a little bit how Scandinavia might have looked like after Ice Age. We know that there has been quite a different megafauna in these years, and the boreal forest looked more like this, very open, a bit more like maybe you are used to in Hungary, big steppes with a lot of grazers and some trees. But as you all know, this megafauna is gone. We still don't really know why, but probably a combination of both hunt and climate change. But today the landscape looks like this. We have a production forest with very even-aged stands. I've already been telling you about these clear-cutting practices, and this makes very even-aged stands all over. And so 2/3 of the boreal forest biome that we have, like around the North Pole, is actually managed for wood production. You can see that from this map here that shows in blue all the managed boreal forest, and in green it shows the unmanaged forest. Here is Scandinavia, just that you know the North Pole would be here. So most of the boreal forest is managed, and actually when you look at the global production, the boreal forest makes up 33% of all lumber and 25% of all paper produced. So it is a very important, economically very, very important ecosystem or biome. Actually in Scandinavia, 90%, you can see there's very little green, the most of it is blue. 90% of the Scandinavian boreal forests are managed. And when I say managed, I mean that we harvest them, we make these even-aged stands, and we increase the productivity. And so this has for sure strong impacts. The favorite winter food in these managed forests is now missing. Moose, they don't actually like that much to eat these pine trees, but because there is nothing else left, that's what they do. Rowan, aspen, and willow are the preferred species for moose in the winter, but the forestry doesn't favor these species, and also the moose population has increased a lot. So wherever those species exist, they are usually browsed. So they don't anymore have like large trees because the moose don't allow them to grow up. They will be they are cropped every year just above the snow level. So this the consequence of that is that moose have to feed on other stuff that they don't like that much. They eat a bit of birch, but they don't like birch that much neither. So they feed a lot on pine, and pine for sure is not planted and produced for moose forage, but it's produced because the forest owner would like to have a lot of timber in 60, 70, 80 or 100 years from now. So then we get into this conflict between forestry, moose harvest, and also conservation, because not only moose would profit from rowan, aspen, and willow, but a lot of other species also could actually would like birds and insects would have much more. We would have a higher biodiversity if we had like more of the deciduous forests. So we are studying, we have a project that just started that looks into how is this conflict affected by climate change. And we look into precipitation and temperature and also extreme weather events, and also the elevated CO2 levels that have kind of a fertilizing effect on the forest. So those are this Taiga Climate Project. And then we also, we have a project that we are going to finish up now that is called Moose on the Move, where we are looking into some of those things, and where we have colored, the snow, sorry, I've forgotten the snow, but the snow is important here, where we also look into these things. So for Moose on the Move, we had like used video cameras on colors for moose, and we have a PhD student now that looks through all those videos, and we did that to see what they eat. For example, here you can see a moose that is eating on a blueberry that is covered by snow, so not the berries themselves, but the blueberry stems, so the bilberry. So as long as it's possible to eat this, they would actually like to eat this. This is kind of their favorite food. But when there is too much snow, they will go over to eating pine. You can see here, and you see they are. I mean, they eat it, but it's not kind of. They probably have to be a bit careful when eating it because it's kind of sticky. But for sure this can make big damage for forestry. So this is one of the main issues we have in the forest. And this happens mostly in the winter areas. Here it's a kind of an animation of the moose that we had colored during our projects, and you can see now in the summer they kind of distribute a bit more throughout the landscape, these different moose. And then in the fall, now harvest has started now. They are still keeping in the summer areas, and now the snow is coming and they are moving back into their wintering areas, and that's where we have a lot of this damage on pine, and we have the problem with the forestry. And for sure this becomes a challenge, because the ones living in these areas here where the moose concentrate in the winter, they have a lot of damage in the forest. But the ones that are living in the summer areas here where the moose had been, they have just only the harvest of moose, so they have kind of only the positive side of the moose, and so there is this conflict of interest between the different landowners, and this is especially complicated when you have a national border, which is this black line here, with Sweden on one side and Norway on the other side. But that would be a totally different talk, and we won't have time to go into that now. So I'm more or less done with my talk. I only want to tell you quickly that we are going to host a big wildlife conference in Norway in 2025 with the main title, How Wild is Wildlife? It is a collaboration between IUGB and also the Nordic Congress of Wildlife and also Euromammals. And we will have this wildlife congress in Lillehammer in 2025, September 1 to 4. So please reserve the date. We will soon come out with a newsletter. You can subscribe to the newsletter on our webpage or by scanning this QR code, and then you will get more information from us. So looking forward to see you in Lillehammer in 2 years from now. Yes, are there any questions? Do we have time for that? Maybe not. Maybe we have a few minutes left. Yes, we have 7 minutes left. So please let me know if you have any questions.
Yeah, we are waiting for questions, and everybody, you can write your questions in the chat if you don't want to, or you can't use your microphone.
No, everybody happy?
Yeah, everybody happy. Yeah, thank you, Barbara. It was a wonderful presentation. Yeah, and for the participants, you can rewatch the seminar on our YouTube channel later, or if a friend couldn't be here. Thank you, Barbara, very much. It was really exciting. And
there was a question coming in.
Yes, yes.
Is there significant competition with smaller mesoherbivores? That's an interesting question. Actually, we don't know. We have a colleague of mine has been working a little bit on this because the main species in mind here is the hare, the mountain hare. We have mountain hares here. And so there might be some competition there. And also we have 3 students, master students, and another colleague of mine supervising them, looking into the beaver moose relationship. So in the same study area where we have done all these studies on the moose densities and what I've been presenting, if now also this year we've had students out registering beaver activity, and we are also then looking into how these GPS colored moose are using waterways. So it will be interesting, but I can unfortunately not answer the question yet. So hopefully we will have an answer in a few years from now. Thank you. Okay, then I think we are done.
Yeah, I think we are done. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.